Yo, where's the poetry people? I'm Derron Sandy, and let me tell you all something. You see, when I sit down with that David Rudder, I just easily just end up in the studio whole day. But it's July 27th, the anniversary of one of the most understudied events in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. David Rudder turned that piece of our history into a lyrical, literary masterpiece. I'll argue that it is the best historical calypso ever created. Well, you already know that. That is my favorite local artist of all time, and he top 3 in any writer that I ever read or heard. Anyway, poetry, plays, anything. And he should have whatever the highest award of whatever we have to offer. So sit back, relax. We might be here for a while, but it's gonna be fun. Like and subscribe and soak in the poetry and Hosay by David Rudder. Now listen, this song is image-filled, metaphorically brilliant, and astute in its strategic use of other literary devices. I don't know how long Rudder take to paint this one, but this is what I call ripping form. Rudder poetically captures a historical point in Trinidad where two Islamic factors juxtapose each other and was played out in real time before our faces. Hosay, a Muslim festival, and the Jamaat-led 1990 coup. Before we get into the text, let's establish the context. Now, as I said before, Rudder bringing two things together, Hosay and the coup. These things are not necessarily related naturally, right? But they make for a great metaphor and juxtaposition. So let's look at the Hosay briefly. It's believed that the indentured laborers from India bring that festival here sometime in the 1840s, right? And they held a series of celebrations to commemorate the martyrdom of Hosay, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be unto him. These things used to frighten the colonial overseers. You know, anytime them see people gathering in the Caribbean, they get frightened. And in the 1880s, them of course was on a vibe of just banning things. And just like the band of the drums, they say, hey, you see them Indian and them gathering there, they're looking too powerful, or they kill off that, right? Lock off that. Right, that's the prohibition before the 1917 prohibition. The organizers try to argue in court. They say, oh God, this is an important festival to them. Colonial people say, well, they move from here with that. But like true revolutionaries, they say, we have in Hosay anyway. And in 1884, several different estates come into Sando to celebrate. The armed forces read the riot act to them, and then buckshot, boom, 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 killing people, hundreds injured, scores dead, Hindus and Muslims alike, because Hindus was in the vibes too. And that is Hosay Fair, something meant to be commemorated in peace and reverence, turned into a massacre. The 1990 coup now. Depending on who you talk to, you'll get different stories. If you listen to the leader at the time, the late Yassin Abu Bakr, he will say that the coup was based on arresting the government for their involvement in illegal drug trading, and they killed some police, some female police officer or some kind of thing. So the media will say that it was due to the rising discontent of conditions under the NAR-led government and the way that was only harassing the Jamaat and them always squatting on land, stop building the boy, we go mash up all the thing, etc. But between July 27th and August 1st, Abu Bakr and members of the Jamaat al-Muslimin occupied key spaces in the state, including Parliament and the state-owned media company TTT. The kicker is, in 1990, both things were happening at the same time, Hosay and the coup. So let's get to how David Rudder brought these two incidents together. Now, the song sent me for a tailspin from the first line, and I like that. I like when the mystery. Where something red was the popular cry. He of course referring to things that were happening pre-coup, where something red, strike squad, 1990, get knocked out of the World Cup. Watch now, this song just capture a whole heap of sadness, just so. And then of course, the red could also be referring to the protests that might have been happening around the time, that they wear red for those kind of activities. But more so to the strike squad, because look at right in the video, the image where something red, like we support the football. Knockout, they never make the World Cup. Plus we get a queen with judgment. And of course, Rudder playing on the intense disillusionment that would have already been happening around the time. And like the pavements and streets, they were filled with envy. Now this is not an overt simile. We have to kind of read it right, I should say. In Trinidad, we may see someone crying and say, like they want a lash. In other words, it seems like they want to last. So Rudder is saying it seems like the pavements and streets were envious of the citizens wearing red. That line is so good, guys. The streets envious of the people's red. So the streets got their own red, which is the blood of the people, the blood shed in the 1990 coup. Over 20 people dead. And it's not just any blood, he say our blood. So the streets are personified to illustrate that although a few people die, the country itself was bleeding due to the shock factor of a coup actually happening. That will happen on that side of the world. And this is further highlighted in the next line. I tell you, not one soul escaped the frenzy. And this just like the Hosay riots, everybody get cornered, pop, 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 pop. Same thing with the coup coming in. That line serves as the landing for the first 3 lines and sets up the next line. He says, this line is bad. You know, sometimes you're gambling king. And wild is the joker, what a metaphor. That we take some time to salute that metaphor. You might never hear nothing like that again, and no Calypso.
You know, sometimes you're gambling king. And wild is the joker.
It's just a perfect image. So alright, let me take the wild joker. Right? Sometimes that could refer to the most powerful card in certain gambling games. So if I had to guess, I'd say that it is a metaphor that potentially shows our political choices and the corresponding consequences of those choices. So the frenzy that now exists was built on us as a people, gambling a new political party. The king is the card you put your hope in, the NAR. A&R Robinson, the leader. But then there's a wild joker that we didn't see coming. Yassin Abu Bakr. The wild joker trumped the king, causing us the people to lose the gamble. We didn't see that wild joker coming. If this metaphor holds, there's also a possibility of the poetic persona asking himself, is this some kind of joke? Abu Bakr, a joker, a coup? Are you for real? As a matter of fact, throughout the song, there's evidence to suggest that Rudder is actually unleashing a scathing critique on the actions of the Jamaat al-Muslimin in 1990. The line after that sort of gives credence to the position of the insurrectionists as jokers. Yes, they're powerful in the moment because they trump the king. But there's jokers here where it says, and sometimes the sight of the moon riles up the lost, the hungry, the mad. Another beautiful line. Now I always say a skillful writer could diss you and you never know. The sight of the moon is what? A symbol of Islam. Just the word, sight the moon, sight the moon. That is Islamic. And Rudder is connecting the moon to lunacy. There's an obvious connection between Islamic fundamentals, the moon, and the madness happening in the coup. Yes, that is why I say the piece could be seen as a scathing critique. The moon is doing the work of transformation, which in itself, as we know, is folkloric belief in many cultures that the moon, they send people mad, werewolf, etc. And rather using that here to paint the behavior of the insurrectionists. At this point, you could almost certainly say he against the coup. He giving it serious denunciation. He asking himself, are these folks mad? And the cross emphasizes this because it says, under the crescent moon and above the bloody asphalt, strange dogs were barking deep in the night. Crescent moon, Islamic symbol. Bloody asphalt connects that back to the pavements earlier in line 2 in the first verse and also looks at the zoomorphism. He called them strange dogs, barking their desires into the night. He ain't gonna call somebody a dog that I like. And here is where more Hosay images come in. Under the crescent moon, I say the drums were silent, but somehow the rhythm continued. Oh, what a sight. In other words, the Muslims will celebrate the Hosay with the drum and thing. But you no drum this wrongs. It's a different kind of rhythm. And you all will obviously see what rhythm he was talking about in a few verses down. The last line of the chorus says, on the night of the day, it was the night of the day, oh the night when they say that the martyrs died. Again alluding to Hosay, this is supposed to be the night we commemorating the death of Hussein and all the people martyred. But this time, he's talking about people who died by the hands of the ones who supposed to be celebrating Hosay. Plot twist and point to note, the Jamaat al-Muslimin are not in the sect of Muslims that traditionally celebrate Hosay. So I wonder if Rudder was creating juxtaposition of how two different philosophies could exist in one religion yielding two very contrasting results. That is something to think about because on one hand, Muslims dying to defend their liberation, and on the other hand, Muslims killing to liberate a nation. Very, very interesting argument. And that is what good literature is doing. It's because it's a real thing about things. Folks, that is just one verse and a chorus. All you have to subscribe because this analysis is just too good. Let's go on to verse 2. Start off oxymoron one time. Famous as hell. I've never seen oxymorons used so skillfully in this song and used so skillfully from none other than David Rudder. This oxymoron is in the form of a simile. Comparing our fame to hell just talks about the global attention we received as a nation at the time, and of course it was not positive attention. A coup was not something heard of on this side of the hemisphere. That oxymoron is followed by what oxymoron should generally be followed by, which is irony. He says, why don't you know we are a star? At long last we made it, like all you don't know, we reach where we going. Again, this line is loaded with devices. Rudder saying, we are a star, we made it, using celebratory terms to show the precarious position we were actually in at the time. Very, very cynical, cheeky. The star again, with stars, an Islamic symbol, and another example of his critique of the insurrectionists. The next line grounds that metaphor in case you're wondering what star he telling you played. A star, like that star in the moon, shining over the tomb. The star in the moon, Islamic symbol. What it doing? It hovering over death. The death of the people that fell in the coup. Then we have a tough line here, and I want to tell me with this analysis. He says, dance the moon, we can't freed it. Well, for one, it's an excellent rhyme sliding off of that tomb line. Nice rhyme transition using a sort of internal interlace rhyme technique. But by dance the moon, I'm wondering if he's using it in the sense of freedom and emotional spiral, which is what the term dance the moon sometimes refers to. Which will make it ironic because, as he says later, we have given ourselves over to a dance of death. So instead of emotional freedom, dancing the moon being emotional freedom is emotional peril. If not that, it may also be a reference to Hosay celebrations, where as they celebrated, they were massacred in the San Fernando Hosay massacre. So a nice piece of history probably coming in there. Any which way, we could all agree that the mood is one of impending gloom, solidified by the final lie. Jump high, jump low, but this Hosay will take the cake. Jump high, jump low is used by us Trinidadians to say despite what happened now, what done happening will go on. We're starting to see that he illustrating that as a pseudo Hosay, a different type of massacre taking place, this time at the hands of Muslims led by Abu Bakr. So it's a real play on Hosay there, like a different Hosay happening. The third verse is where I realize that Rudder is the genius. And I'll have to prepare for this because the imagery is a bit complicated, but we already established the historical context. He starts with evangelical allusion with the line, the power and the glory so close at hand. What does this mean? Well, I already told you before. Hosay was to be celebrated on August 1st in 1990. July 27 was just a few days off Hosay. So the act of the coup itself was ironic and Rudder skillfully captures that in the song. So the celebration of Hussein is close, but there's a beast lurking. Great contrast, great plot twist. Who is the beast? Had to be the Jamaat. So while Muslims waiting to celebrate by looking for the correct moon to commemorate Hosay, the Jamaat appears as vultures in that moon. This is a juxtaposition of magnanimous intellectual proportions. He extends that idea again. This verse is my absolute favorite. He extends the idea by saying, but then a chosen people never worry about these things. We don't worry about vulture and the moon and thing. Who is this chosen people? Well, for one, it could be us Trinidadians who think God is a Trini, who think everything nice. And it could also be the followers of Islam who, like many other religions, consider themselves a chosen people. Nothing wrong with that. That is a religion, usually chosen people. So in a sense, Rudder may be saying that even Muslims were blindsided by this attack. And remember, I said that I will tell you what the rhythm continuing into the night represents. Rudder answers these questions here with these metaphors.
So the roll of the tassa began to sound like the rhythm of bullets and the thundering boom bass. Well, that was a bomb,
So the roll of the tassa began to sound like the rhythm of bullets and the thundering boom bass. Well, that was a bomb. Was a bomb. Rudder is a master of verse trees. I had to do some more research into Rudder to find out, hey, David, Why anniversary and them so bad, boy? Why anniversary? Just like in Calypso music, we talk about that before. And he ends with justification of what I was saying before. In this Muslim time when the Hosay is number one, the whole song is about showing that there is a pseudo Hosay taking place. This is not the real thing. This coup that happening here is not what we're supposed to be celebrating. Let's go to the last verse to see what Rudder wanted to leave us with. He starts with an evangelical allusion again. He says, not in this house, not in this garden of Eden. Oh, something like that could happen in Trinidad, boy. He exaggerates it by calling us, our place, a garden of Eden. And Rudder sort of equating the coup to the first sin, innocence, loss. However, he's also saying that what Abu Bakr did was open a door and show us the other side. The coup was the other side of paradise we had been ignoring all the time, but now we have to watch it. One of the best Calypso metaphors I'll go ever see, follow that. And our Mecca illusions walk right on by. Oxymoron again. Mecca illusions illustrating that we were perfectly naive to something like this happening. Yes, there were riots and uprisings before, but not to this magnitude where the sacred places of power were overturned for almost a week. Rudder suggests that we had been dancing over our differences, and as such, now we know what is what.
Now we know what is Uzi diplomacy. Now we know what is SLR love.
The best oxymoron you'll ever find in Calypso. So Hosay is all about the play on the festival, relating it to what actually happened in the 1990 coup. Perfect composition by Mr. David Rudder. 10 out of 10 on the poetry scale. There's the poetry in Hosay by the boss, David Rudder.